We go back to resolution number 1, recognize the Commissioner DeWitt.
All right, to the Honorable Rick Brewer, Chairman and members of the Hawkins County Board of Commission in regular session, met this 28th day of March, that should be 2022. Resolution reference utilizing funding from Hawkins County's ARPA grant total to match the Hawkins County Board of Education's $2 million investment in the new CTE facility at Phipps Bend. Whereas in March 2021, an ad hoc committee was appointed to determine and make recommendations on the appropriate expenditures of the federal ARPA COVID stimulus funding. And whereas the above mentioned ad hoc committee at its meeting on Thursday, February 10th, 2022, passed a motion to forward on to the Budget Committee and upon committee approval on to the full County Commission a recommendation concerning setting aside funding for the use toward government services. And whereas at its meeting on February 22nd, 2022, the Budget Committee agreed with the ad hoc committee recommendation. And whereas although the final rule becomes effective in April, Jason Mumpower, Controller of the Treasury for the state of Tennessee, has issued a memo stating recipients can choose to take advantage of the final rule's flexibility and simplifications immediately ahead of the effective date. And whereas the Hawkins County Board of Education has previously voted to provide up to $2 million in funding for use toward construction of a new career and technical education facility in Hawkins County Industrial Park, particularly to show their support achieving additional grant funding, and has encouraged other concerned entities to do the same. And whereas the ad hoc committee believes an investment into the CTE facility will be of tremendous benefit to the future workforce of the county and a large draw for new teachers in the area. Now therefore be it resolved that the full commission approves setting aside $2 million of Hawkins County's ARPA funds as potential investments in the new CTE facility, effectively matching the amount set aside by the Hawkins County Board of Education. And the committee encourages seeking additional funding from the state of Tennessee and other interested groups and entities. Mr. Chairman, I so move.
Motion by Commissioner DeWitt, second by Commissioner Harrell. Commissioner Housewright, you recognize.
I got a couple of questions, Commissioner DeWitt.
Yes.
They're supposed to, and I'm for it.
Yeah.
Just how could we put some kind of contingency clause? Second, let's say if my understanding is correct, they get up to possible $5 million grant from the state. Okay, we don't know the terms of the grant, the timeline, and what is the exact, have they got an estimate of what it would cost? Potentially, because of the way everything is, you can't nail anything down concrete.
I'm going to address the first part of your question first.
Yeah,
in all honesty, I had an amendment to this laying on my desk and I didn't bring it with me. That I would like to add a line that says, you know, if $2 million that we set aside for matching isn't used, it goes back into the general fund.
We'd have to put a time, did your amendment have like a timeline?
No, it doesn't. You know, we don't really know what the timeline is. Frankie, can you address the second part of it as far as total amounts? I know it's all still up in the air, but basically this money is used as, hey, we are supporting this. We want the state to know that we're supporting this. And that's the basis of this whole resolution.
Yeah, so you're right. It's difficult to nail down anything today with prices fluctuating the way they are. The best estimate we have is based on square footage of the proposed facility and what the architects are telling us to use as a baseline number. And that puts the construction of the facility as well as site prep and minimal furnishing at about $13 million.
Okay, let's say we get $5 million. We'll just work off of that. The school matches up our 2, we match the school should be at 9, let's say we're 13, and if you figure your overage, 10, 20, I mean, let's just work off of 15, so we're $6 million short. Okay, and let's say it gets worse, we come out trying to collect, get workforce, products, where does the 6 million come into play? And then, I know I'm asking maybe too big question, but is there a timeline on the state to where you have to implement it of that money, or do you have to have it a percentage done?
Well, so funding from the state level has not been secured at this point. It's been requested, as a matter of fact, it was requested this afternoon in appropriation subcommittee. And we won't know anything about that for a few weeks at minimum. Timeline wise, the piece of property in question adjacent to TCAT, there's a 3-year timeline on that offer to make that available to us. Now, that can be extended if we're making progress and we just haven't made it there at the end of 3 years. They can push that out further. As far as this commission and the resolution you're considering, Commissioner DeWitt helped me with this. The ARPA funding, the timeline on that had to be expended by December.
We have to commit it by December 31st, 2024, and spend by the end of December 31st, I believe, 2027.
So that would put us roughly 5 years. You know, I hope to goodness we can do it in 5. Now, it may not happen. And if that be the case, you know, I think you're making a good point, and I wouldn't hesitate to put a time frame on it to be reconsidered if we haven't made substantial progress by, say, 2024. Maybe the commission could reconsider.
The timeline, like I say, I'm for that, but just to protect the investment and your past experiences with the grants from the state stuff, do they put implement a timeline is there a penalty or?
The request that was made today is not actually a grant, it's just strictly an appropriation request. So it would be a straight transfer of cash.
Okay.
Now, what you're considering today, I'm glad you asked the question, because the reason we're here asking for this is what you're asking for, what you're considering today will help us secure additional grant funding that would have timelines attached to it. Anytime we're applying for federal, state, or other grants, it's very beneficial if we can show that we have a local match piece to those grant fundings that we're asking for. So if we go seeking a grant for another $2 million, if we can point to the county commission's action of committing $2 million to this project, it really bolsters our chances of securing those funds.
That's what we want.
Absolutely.
I guess I'd make a suggestion to Commissioner DeWitt. Do you know what your amendment said, so we could go ahead and get this passed?
My amendment.
Voted on it.
My amendment said, you know, if the money is not used for this purpose, that it goes back to the line item in the budget, and it's not encumbered anymore.
Could we word it possibly like, put a timeline on contingency up on the other funding from the state or something to secure us?
I don't want to put it, contingency on the funding from the state.
No, I'm saying the timeline.
The timeline.
Yeah, not.
Well, considering we have to say what we're going to spend this ARPA funds on by December 31st, 2024. You know, I wouldn't hesitate to put a date like October 1st, 2024, if funding's not available. We're going to have to say it's going or it's not going by the end of 2024.
I was thinking, was it 2026? We have to have it spent. I mean,
It's 26 or 27 now.
Are you putting that in the form of amendment?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is there a second to that amendment?
I'll write it out.
I'll second.
Okay,
Just a
Nancy.
second, hang on just a minute. Now, who seconded that? Charles. Charles, second. Okay. Commissioner DeWitt, I
Yes.
wrote that if the money or is it $2 million?
Yes.
Is not used for the CTE facility, it will revert back to the Hawkins County General Fund. Do you want to?
I would put revert back to the Hawkins County General Fund line item for the ARPA funds. And we need to put that October 31st in there.
I think, okay, if you don't put a date,
I understand.
it's always dangling.
I understand.
Need to designate.
By what date?
October 31st, 2024.
31st, 2024.
Yeah, that'll give us some leeway in there to, let's say we'll make a decision at that time on 2024.
Okay, let me read it one more time, please.
Okay.
If the money is not used by October 31st, 2024 for the CTE facility, it will revert back to the Hawkins County General Fund line item for the ARPA funds.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Let me clarify one thing for myself. If we're making progress on this, and we see that, we're gonna get the state funds, we're gonna get this, and then we can apply for, I think the Appalachian, there's another grant that we can apply for. And if we say that we're gonna do that, the timelines may not fall in place. So can we redesignate this if we put it back in the fund?
We have to designate it, we have to have it completely designated by the end of 2024.
Okay.
So, I think that's plenty of time to, we're up against the wall on that, December 31st, 2024. We can't move that at all. But the reason I'm saying October is, we could reconsider it again, November, December, in those months while we're working on other things. I don't want to put the December 31st deadline in there because that doesn't give us any time to make any other moves on it.
When Dr. Williams and I were talking about this afternoon, we felt like we didn't want to hamstring the commission in tying up these funds if we weren't making progress. But I do think the conversation this evening along the lines of us making progress or dedicating or demonstrating that progress, and then making a decision in October if you really have to have that reallocated by no later than December. That gives you 60 days
Right.
beyond that to reallocate to where the cost.
Whether it's back to this project, if you're making
Correct.
progress, or it's to another project, we'll have
Correct.
the
And we
money
don't-
available.
We don't have any intention on tying this up if there's other
Well, I-
causes which you have no end to.
I firmly, and I think most of this commission will back me, I firmly believe in what you all are doing with this money, with this project. And I would not have brought it up to the ad hoc committee if I didn't.
Well, I do appreciate that, and if it does pass, please know that this goes a long way. This is a huge shot in the arm for us to then approach industry
Yep.
and other partners and say, look, we've got both of our local governing bodies supporting this and demonstrating.
Absolutely. I know you've got plans to go after money in other places.
Sure.
And I don't think it's gonna be, but I think the goal is attainable, let's put it that way.
I appreciate it.
Any other, Keith? I'm sorry.
Matt, will you sit down?
Yep.
I'm having a hard time talking, so I'm restrained. If, from what you said, if this passes in this budget this year, will that money be appropriated when? In this next upcoming year from the state?
So if it passes now, it'll be available post July 1.
Will that speed you all up on getting this project started?
I think if we can approach potential investors or partners and say that we've got a total of $9 million available to us for this project.
So $5 million is what you're asking from the state?
Yes, that's what Gary Hicks and Senator Lundberg supported in the allocation this evening, so.
How much are you gonna have the full amount before you do kick the project off?
We were talking about that this evening, this afternoon actually, and I think we'll probably start working on a timeline for when we would need architects, drawings, engineering, groundwater flow studies and those types of things, because it is adjacent to that creek. There's some additional things that we may need to get started on at our expense up front to see if we can get that project kick-started and shorten that overall construction timeline.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if we're not gonna talk about the amendment, we need to vote on it.
We're talking about it, I think.
I don't think anything that said the last thing had anything to do with the amendment, actually, so if we're
Is there any other discussion on the
we
amendment?
vote the amendment, then go
Commissioner
back to
Barrett, you
the.
got discussion on the amendment?
No, I think what I need to ask needs to come back
Okay.
after we vote.
Any other discussion on the amendment? If not, let's vote on the amendment.
19 yes, 2 absent.
Amendment passes. We'll go back to the resolution as amended, and Commissioner Barrett, you have a comment on that?
Yes, sir, I just got one question. Does this have any effect on the county's maintenance of the effort towards the school board?
Because we are looking at, initially speaking, when we opened the CT program, not adding staffing initially, pulling from existing programs, creating intermediate and advanced courses that would be housed down there, it would not add to the maintenance of effort. Now, beyond that, if we get 2 or 3 years down the road and there's some success behind it, we need to grow beyond what our current instructors can teach. Perkins funding is completely different, CTE funding is completely different than our general fund funded positions. So what that would do is if we have the numbers and those are successful programs and they're leading to meaningful employment for our students coming out of that program or going to see TCAC and then moving on, I don't see that it would be a burden on maintenance of effort at all because these have to generate the numbers required for funding from the state to offset that.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Harrell.
When this is all done, the state takes care of it and everything, will the schools be able to take care of all the maintenance and everything, or we gonna have to look back at the taxpayers down the road, or how's all that gonna work down later on?
Good question. Considering that we did have to make the tough decision to close 2 school sites, we have consolidated where we have needed to, and we have not requested any additional maintenance staff, considering that this would be replacing one of those school buildings that we did have to close and consolidate. The burden on our maintenance staff, ground staff, that type of thing would be no more than it was, let's say, 2 years ago. So yes, we would be planning for that, and I don't see that would be a shortcoming on our maintenance staff or our efforts to maintain such a property.
No, thank you.
Because it's centrally located, we're not talking about a large pool of the grounds or maintenance staff for outside the area either, so.
Is any other discussion? If not, everyone ready to vote? You can cast your vote.
Nineteen yes, 2 absent.
Resolution carries.